Tim Curran leading off with some Big Ten news. Conference Commissioner Kevin Warren stated in an open letter today that the vote held by the league's presidents was, quote, overwhelmingly in favor of suspending fall sports and will not be revisited. Moving on to Major League Baseball, got a couple games in progress. Royals right now lead the Reds 4-0 at the end of the sixth inning. In the bottom of the third, it's the Chicago Cubs, the 2-0 lead over the Cardinals in Game 2 of their doubleheader. Cards won Game 1 9-3. Couple games just about to get underway. Nationals and Braves, Rays, Yankees, and Indians, Pirates are all a few moments away. Then first pitch between the Mets and Marlins is expected at 6:10. And the NBA playoffs got one game in progress. Right now, it's the 76ers who lead the Celtics 27-14 with 3.5 minutes remaining in the first quarter. That's Game 2. Boston leads the series 1-0. A couple finals from earlier today. Raptors took down the Nets 104-99. Also, the Jazz topped the Nuggets 124-105. Then coming up at 8 o'clock, the Mavericks will square off with the Clippers. And in NHL playoff action right now, it's the Colorado Avalanche with a healthy lead over the Arizona Coyotes, 5-0 there with just 3.5 minutes to go there in the second period. Colorado leads that series 3-1. Live inside the Husker Sports Network studios, Tim Curran.
Your state, your team, your show. This is Sports Nightly.
Snap down, the kick is up, and the kick is good! Here's Lane! Huskers win it 13-10. They beat Northwestern and go to 4-2.
Now, let's check the pulse of Husker Nation with your hosts, Greg Sharp and Ben McLaughlin.
We've waited 8 days for a little more clarification from the Big Ten office. Well, they have delivered. A letter from the commissioner came out about an hour ago today where he says they deeply value what sports means to our student athletes, their families, our coaches, our fans. The vote of the Big Ten Council of Presidents and Chancellors was overwhelmingly in support of postponing fall sports and will not be revisited. The decision was thorough and deliberative and based on sound feedback, guidance, and advice from medical experts. Despite the decision to postpone fall sports, we continue our work to find a path forward that creates a healthy and safe environment for all Big Ten student athletes to compete in the sports they love in a manner that helps to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and protects both student athletes and the surrounding communities. Then he kind of goes into giving us a history lesson of COVID-19 and when it began around the world, when it came to the U.S., how many cases in the U.S., kind of filler material, basically. And then he kind of went into some their primary factors about the transmission rates, the lack of some testing in some of our institutions that we didn't feel were adequate enough to keep the safety of our student athletes at the top of mind. So, fairly lengthy letter from Kevin Warren. It's really the second time today we've heard from him. He did do a interview earlier today with Sports Business Journal, which really was almost identical to the interview he gave Dave Revson of BTN last week. But then just after 5 o'clock, this letter came out, Ben McLaughlin, which I'm sure answers every single one of your questions you have.
Yeah, I mean, I can wash my hands of this. I can move on. I can watch episodes of Breaking Bad tonight and have the what happened to the Big Ten completely out of my mind. No, I mean to me it was there was some stuff in here that I think was helpful, but I think a lot of it was, you said, was just fluff. I mean, it almost seemed like he just Wikipedia'd the information on COVID-19, of the origins and the number of kids. Like, we're all aware of what it is, where it came from, when it started, how it got here, and the numbers of people that it's affected. And the thing that I was really hoping to see in here that I just didn't was more medical proof of what they've been hearing and why it's such a detriment. Instead, all we heard was the arguments for canceling a season. I mean, that's all we've heard is you've got two sides to this deal. You've got the side that's for and the side that's against. And we all know the reasons why people are against it, right? The transmission rates, contact tracing, some of those other things that that we don't know and we won't know. And to me, the biggest issue with this, Greg, is it sounds like there's a heck of a lot of momentum for a season to start in January. That seems to be where a lot of people's heads are at right now. So let's just assume that's the case. Let's just for 1 second assume that the Big Ten and Kevin Warren are going to try and start something in January. You mean to tell me that these issues are going to be fixed in 3 months? There's no way. There's no way that these same issues that they're talking about and their concerns are no longer concerns in January. And let's be honest, they can't be concerned starting in December because that's when you're going to start practicing. That's when you're going to start getting ramped back up. So these need to have answers. These questions need to have answers in just over 2 months, which I just don't see happening. And so, the same reasons why, you pull the plug in fall, yet you want to act like you're optimistic about winter. I just don't understand by that logic how you can arrive at the conclusion that it's going to happen. I just don't think that that's the case.
One thing that's still very unclear, let me go back to the statement, the vote by the Big Ten Council of Presidents and Chancellors was overwhelmingly in support of. We've got the Minnesota president saying we didn't take a vote. You have Sandy Barber, the Penn State athletic director, said, I don't think they took a vote. But clearly in this statement, he says the vote, which I don't know that it happened. I think it was a discussion point, and it was kind of the general feeling in the room that we can go on and do that. So you still have that hanging out there of something that isn't still quite locked down. And again, he doesn't need to tell me what the vote was, but if there wasn't really a vote, don't tell me that there was a vote in here. And you've got several people that have come out and said, yeah, there really wasn't a vote. I just
sounds like there is. Ronnie Green went on our affiliate KLIN today and said that there was a vote. So I'm becoming more convinced that there was a vote, but why is it so unclear that there was? I mean, and why are and from everything that we're told, it was not unanimous. So clearly there were folks in the room that didn't necessarily agree with this. And if it was such a unanimous decision, why is there so much pushback right now? Like, why were all those rumors floating around that there were 5 schools getting ready to launch a fall season despite the Big Ten for a 10-game schedule? Like, why was that a thing? So clearly the commissioner is telling us that just about everybody was on the same page with this, but everything that we're hearing from all the other campuses, nobody's on the same page at all. So that's where I struggle with it, is you've got some people that are apparently in one corner, and then you've got a lot of other folks in another corner saying and doing things that would suggest that they really want to play this fall. So there's no clarity there to me.
Brett McMurphy, who's a longtime college football correspondent, has conducted within the last hour and a half an interview with Ohio State AD Gene Smith. And he got this quote, Ben, from Gene Smith. While a decision has been made by the Big Ten Conference to postpone the fall season, we view this as a temporary delay. We are actively planning for the winter and spring seasons for all sports, including the return of football. That goes into what you were saying, that the thing that's gotten some momentum the last 24 hours is not a spring football season, but a winter football season. Ohio State has floated this for the last couple of days. Ryan Day has put this out there. James Franklin, who we're going to hear from in hour number 2, he had a press conference today. He alluded to a winter season where teams would travel to Minneapolis, Detroit, and Indianapolis, where they have dome stadiums, home of the Vikings, home of the Lions, home of the Colts, and you could play doubleheaders on a Saturday where you could play somebody one game at noon, one game at 6, one game at noon, one game at 6. 9-week schedule, play 8 games, have a conference championship game, have a Rose Bowl game with your conference champion. After that, and by being done by sometime in March, you're fine for next fall. And you bring up the great point. How do you think you're going to get over all this in the next 3 months? Football's an outdoor sport, which the transmission we do know is much less likely to transmit outside. But every practice, as you point out, is going to have to be inside because you're going to start in December with practices. Your games are going to be inside. You still don't have any fans at the games, so you're not helping your local communities out by having home football games there. But that does seem to be the momentum building right now. In fact, Jeff Petrikis from the Madison paper up in Madison, Wisconsin, said that information has been shared with Wisconsin's football parents, that this is what we're leaning toward right now, is trying to play an indoor season starting in January.
Yeah, there is a lot about that I'm not sure about. And again, he even Commissioner Warren addressed this in his letter today about how to safely determine the amount of games you could play in a calendar year. To me, that's drawn into question. Yes, it helps if you're bumping it up, let's just say 2 months from March to January. That helps, but again, how about the overarching issue, Greg? Let's just say the Big Ten's the only league that does this. What's going to happen? Like, is the conference championship the national championship? Like, there is literally no outside competition other than in your league.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know. This whole thing is funky. The thing that's frustrating to me is that, and there's no way that this becomes the case, that all 5 conferences can get on the same page. But that's the most frustrating thing to me is we're in a world right now where 3 of these conferences are trying to give it a go. The Big Ten's talking about January. The Pac-12's talking about spring. We're all over the map here. And so, I don't know what's going to happen at the end of these seasons. You know, what's the excitement every Saturday is if you lose, you're in trouble. You know, that's one knock on your playoff belt. You lose again, and there is no playoff belt. You lose 3 times, you got to worry about your division. That's the fun part about every Saturday is every Saturday matters. I mean, if you're one of those teams that, isn't picked to win the league, what are you playing for? I know the athletes want to get out there and play, and they'd play against air right now if they could. I understand that. But there are also a lot of people out there like a Justin Fields, like a Trevor Lawrence, that the whole point of coming back to school is to raise that trophy at the end. And if there's no opportunity to do that, it's just such a frustrating and weird thing because this season would take away everything that we love about college football, which is the championship games, the bowl games, the prestigious bowl games, New Year's Day, and yes, even the college football playoff. If we don't have that, this season loses a lot of pageantry, in my opinion.
No doubt. You mentioned Ronnie Green was on our Lincoln affiliate KLIN at the bottom of the hour, so about 45 minutes ago. Here was a quote from his interview there. He says, quote, "There is a growing level of enthusiasm among the presidents about staging a successful season in the winter." And I'm with you. I was real skeptical about if you tried to start it in late February or March. I just don't know how in the world you could launch this thing the first Saturday of January. I don't get it. Well, if you've got some thoughts about this, did the commissioner's statement clarify it all for you? Here's the numbers if you want to be a part of it: 531-500-4686. You can also shoot us a text on that very same number. That is our U.S. Cellular text line. U.S. Cellular, the official wireless provider of Husker Athletics, at 531-500-4686. There is still scheduled to be a parent protest outside the offices of the Big Ten in suburban Chicago on Friday. I think that is still going to take place. But by the statement today, it will not be revisited. That was the line in the statement, that the fall season will not be revisited by the Big Ten Conference. They have put their foot in the ground and said, no, that's the line in the sand. We're not going to be talking about fall football or fall sports again. It's an interesting thing to do. I don't know how it's safe to be flying teams into those northern cities and foot of snow on the ground in Minneapolis or Detroit, slogging through that to go inside an NFL stadium to play games. I think there's an awful lot of things to work over that, but we've heard it from Ryan Day. We've heard it from James Franklin. That seems to be the plan of the day right now in the Big Ten.
Well, and how about, look, there's so much differing opinion on the way this virus is going to turn in the next few months, but the big concern right now for a lot of people is how the flu season affects this virus coming up here in the wintertime. And that seems to be right in the heart of all this seems to be ramping up. You know, when the flu season is going around in November, December, you're supposed to be getting ready for a football season. So what type of complex scenarios does that happen? Are you confusing flu symptoms with COVID systems? How does that influence testing? To me, there are still tons of questions that are going to pop up that it's inconceivable to me that we're going to have answers for this thing in January. Maybe that's me being a pessimist. I don't know. But there are a lot of things that are going to have to go right for a January season to happen.
No doubt. Okay, here's what we have on the program tonight. Matt Schick of ESPN is going to join us in a couple of minutes. Matt, a big part of their coverage of college football. We'll get his take on what the Big Ten has been doing the last couple of weeks. We'll see what he thinks about the way Nebraska's been treated by some of his colleagues there at ESPN. Matt used to work television up in Omaha, but has been with ESPN now for a number of years, so he'll join us here in a couple of minutes. Second hour of the program, we will check in with Jeremiah Searles, this week's edition of Husker Huddle. Nick Gates will be his focus. Nick is currently in an NFL camp and cranking away there. We'll have that conversation. Lane Grindle, our Major League Baseball insider, will join us during hour number 2 as well. The return tonight of buy-sell after a 5-month absence will return in hour number 3. And we'll hear the latest from the Nebraska Highway Safety Office that's coming out with a new campaign. They want to tell you all about that coming up in hour number 3. When we come back, Matt Schick will join me. Hump Day. Oh, halfway close to a new weekend. Looking forward to that. We're looking forward to chatting with our next guest, Matt Schick, former KETV personality up in Omaha. And now, are you closing in on a decade with ESPN? Is that about right? Are you that close?
We're getting there, Greg.
Yeah.
I've almost got my Mickey Mouse pin that I think they give you when you get to about 10 years. 2012 was when I started,
Yeah.
so we just finished 8. I think it was 8 years last week.
So that's what it is. The 10-year gift is a Mickey Mouse pin. That's what gets
I think
presented.
so. Yeah, I mean, I think the 5-year I got a Pluto little pin, and then
Okay.
maybe 10-year might be Goofy or something. 25 might be Mickey. I might have a ways to go for Mickey. I'm not sure.
Maybe they let you sleep in one of the castles for a night when you get to the 25th anniversary.
I know. I'd like to get my hair all done and do that little Cinderella thing. I don't know. We'll see.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you jumping on board with us here tonight.
Yeah.
We Kevin Warren came out with a statement late this afternoon. I think you were still doing a radio show at that time. What'd you make of the commissioner's release here this afternoon?
My biggest takeaway is could have saved himself a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of emotional heartache, and a lot of headaches had he done this a week ago. This wasn't very complicated to have to do, and truly nothing that he said that was in there was really exact or things that you really had to have a week to think about. I mean, these are all things that people were surmising were reasons. It was essentially a Cliff's Notes version of the Pac-12 release, the PDF that they sent out. And so, it all makes sense. I think the big takeaway, too, is where it says the vote was overwhelmingly in support. We know it wasn't unanimous. If it was unanimous, they would have said that. But it said overwhelmingly in support, and it's not going to be revisited. So maybe that was a way for Kevin Warren to kind of head off some of the parental protests that might be heading his way tomorrow with some Ohio State parents coming to greet him. But it's look, I don't envy Kevin Warren's position. I think he came into this job at the worst time and dealing with the pandemic and conference season, the conference tournament being canceled, NCAA tournament being canceled, social justice, everything going on, and then having to deal with canceling a season or postponing it, in his words. This is a tough time to learn on the job, and he's done a lot of learning over the last few months.
Matt, let's go back a month. Kevin Warren and the Big Ten were the first ones to announce they were just going to try to do a conference schedule only. Mm-hmm. How surprising was that to you and the folks you talked to? It seemed to catch a lot of people off guard.
Well, it did because they were the first to do it. And that's why when they postponed the season, it caught us off guard, because they were the first to do it. And, you thought they would be a little more deliberate than they were. The conference-only stuff, it was fine, and then once everyone else did it, it made more sense, which is why I think the Big Ten Pac-12 decision of postponing is still leaving a lot of people wondering why they did it when they did it, because no one else is following their lead at this point. Granted, the SEC has a later schedule. They don't start till the end of September. But I think what the Big Ten did that was smart was that in that conference release, conference-only schedule, they made a note in the end of that release saying, if we are able to play. And every time they've released something, Greg, they have said, and even when they released the schedule a couple weeks ago, they said, if we are able to play. They never said, hey, let's go. They essentially sent you the wedding invitation but said, don't buy the plane ticket yet because there are some issues that we need to be resolved, and if you're going to buy a wedding gift, hang on to the receipt. They were at least careful to let you know that all the hay wasn't in the barn yet, and that was obviously the case.
You give me that advice years after most of my buddies tried to get married, so you're a little late. Matt Schick's with us from ESPN and ESPN Radio. Nebraska has been in the spotlight in the last week. The day before the Big Ten pulled the plug on the season, Scott Frost had a press conference. It was already scheduled. It was day 3 of the camp, and came out and said, hey, if the Big Ten does not move forward, we'd like to try to cobble together a schedule. That didn't go over real well nationally. What did you make of the reaction that Nebraska and Scott Frost got from those comments?
I thought Nebraska turned into a very easy whipping boy for the anger and frustration that people had that the season was getting canceled. And you had guys saying, hey, who does Nebraska think it is? What do they think they've done? What have they accomplished to be able to say these types of things? And essentially what Nebraska did was they ran interference for Ohio State, because Ohio State was doing the same things, but Scott Frost was the one that put some voice to it before the decision actually happened. And I don't think, and this is where I give leniency to a lot of national folks who were crushing Nebraska for it, because the cherry-picked, the soundbite that Scott Frost had was cherry-picked. No one is going to sit and watch a 25-minute news conference or a Zoom news conference involving Nebraska right now when everything's going on. And so they cherry-pick the one thing about we'll look elsewhere or we'll do whatever we can to play. But I think no one can understand how important Nebraska is to the state unless you've lived in the state. And so you got a lot of national folks who are ripping on them for saying the things that they said. But if they actually experience what Nebraska is, you would understand where that was coming from. And I've said time and time again that Scott Frost was not saying what he said to defend his team. Like, I felt team was 3rd or 4th or 5th on the list. It was state, it was economy, it was livelihood, it was morale, it was everything that goes along with Nebraska football in that state. And that's who he was standing up for, knowing the consequences of canceling football. And now you're going to find out really what he meant over the next 6 months, unless we can get some sort of spring season going.
Again, visiting with Matt Schick of ESPN and ESPN Radio here on Sports Nightly. You're there in the heart of ACC country. They're still a go. The SEC is still a go. The Big 12 is still a go. What kind of confidence level are you sensing from the people that are down in that region that they can make this thing work in the next couple of months?
Well, I think there's confidence because I think it's going to be a staring contest between the ACC and SEC. That's why I still think it comes down to the Big 12. I think both of these conferences are going to look at each other, and unless they decide mutually, go, hey, do you think we should cancel? Yeah, I think we should postpone. Okay, let's do it together. Then it comes down to the Big 12. But you're right, Greg. I mean, you see what's going on in the ACC, even up the coast at Pitt. I mean, they've pivoted to remote learning until mid-September. North Carolina's had some clusters of outbreaks, and they're not going to have athletics going until at least 5 o'clock tomorrow local time, and then they're going to reassess. And then Notre Dame suspending their workouts. And then you go further south, and you have Ole Miss dealing with an outbreak as well. So I think – what you're seeing is why the Big Ten made the decision that they had to make, because I don't necessarily felt that they would feel comfortable doing remote learning and having football. And I think they could see that that's where this is headed. And it's funny, Greg, because when we started out, it was, hey, you can't have fans if you don't have fans, you can't have football. Well, then we started to get okay with that. Okay, well, if no fans, we'll still have football. But it was always, oh, we don't have students, we can't have student athletes on campus. Well, now it sounds like we're getting – so, we're moving the goalposts a lot, and I think the further we get along here, the more comfortable we'll be with a very odd situation. I think they're just so desperate to play and have these sports that I think they ultimately might leave it up to the student athletes. Say, are we comfortable with this, even though you're in a bubble, even though you might be the only ones on campus at this point? It's going to be interesting to see. But the timing, the fact that they've got the, quote, longer runway up until next month, they've probably got a couple weeks here till they're going to have to make a decision. The Big Ten made its decision because they were a month out.
Yeah, those schools may be kind of glad the outbreaks are happening now. Maybe they'll calm down in 3 to 4 weeks and they'll be good to go. Again, it's going to be a fascinating story to follow and watch and observe. And that's all we can do now here, Matt, in Nebraska. We can only observe. We're out of the game, so that's all we've got is a chance to sit back and watch everybody else. How you been? You're hooking up with your old partner doing some podcasts again. Is that right?
Yeah, we've had a little fun, a little too much fun. We had a nice little, very kind and unnecessary write-up from Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. I wrote a good story today about it, and yeah, we're about 20 episodes in or so, and just reuniting with the old Lincoln Southeast standout who holds the consecutive free throw record in the state, Nicholas Allen Baugh. We've been having fun doing a weekly podcast with him. We're going to record again another one later in the week, but the response has been great. And, as it says in the story, we just wanted to get back together because we felt, first of all, we needed to laugh a little bit more because the pandemic was not very fun, and it still isn't. But also just to be able to provide some laughter for some other people that could use it and to reconnect with the folks in Nebraska at the same time. So, yeah, a little Schick and Nick podcast. I would invite everyone to subscribe to it and check it out every week and just be a part of it's just great to be a part of Nebraska again. I wasn't born there, but I consider it home. So I always love coming on. I love reconnecting all the time.
Very good. Matt, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. Stay well.
Greg, you as well.
Matt Schick, ESPN Radio with us here on Sports Nightly. He joined us on our Sports Nightly hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. All right, phone lines open for you, 531-500-4686. Give us a shout if you have some thoughts about the letter from the commissioner today, your thoughts about this plan that's being floated out there about a winter season starting the first week of January, heading to the bubbles of Detroit, Minneapolis, and Indianapolis to play in those indoor stadiums of those NFL franchises. Doubleheaders at both sites each Saturday, and try to go over a 9-week period, get 8 games in over the winter. If you don't feel comfortable dialing us up with a comment or question on the air, you can fire us a text at the same number, 531-500-4686. Ben will rejoin me next. 315-500-4686. The number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question or shoot us a text. We do have a Runs a Twitter poll up tonight. Did Kevin Warren's open letter about postponing the Big Ten fall season answer your questions? Yes, no, or somewhat. You can leave a comment as well. 90% no. Shocking. Not really.
Yeah, I mean, even if they're part of that 90% felt like maybe some of their questions were answered, the commissioner's reputation is setting himself up for failure in that question.
All right, let's go to some texts. Our text line question, Ben, will the 2021 season be moved back if there is a January 2020 season?
I would say, yeah. I would say that is a very realistic possibility, and everybody probably knows where Nebraska is supposed to open their 2021 season. In which case, I'm not sure that would happen unless the Irish people are flexible and they can still negotiate that being a week 0 game, because the only way that game's going to happen is if the team's allotted some time to get back and get rested.
Rob wants to know who appointed the new commissioner to the Big Ten. There was a search committee that identified him. He then met with a small sampling of university presidents who then recommended him to the full vote. So the full vote of the school president/chancellors is who appointed Kevin Warren as the new commissioner of the Big Ten Conference, succeeding Jim Delaney, who retired last January. This one, will there be a fall national championship and a spring national championship? The answer would be no. We'll wait and see what the college football playoff folks want to do. They've said, Ben, if the three of the Power Fives play this fall, they'll put together their bracket with that group. So there would be nothing other than if you wanted to try to have kind of a bowl game or two that you kind of piece together for anybody in the spring. At least that's how I understand it.
Yeah, and if one league is starting in January and the other's starting in March, the seasons aren't going to align, so you might just end up having a bowl game against somebody in your own conference. So it makes sense. If I'm the College Football Playoff Committee, I'm going with the majority too. I mean, I'm not going to appease one of the solo conferences, that being either the Big Ten or the Pac-12. Give me the one with three over anything if I could still have it.
Yeah. All right, so 531-500-4686, the number if you want to be a part of this one. Let's head up to Omaha. And Joe, good evening. Joe, welcome to Sports Nightly.
Good evening. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good, Joe. How are you?
Not too bad. I just, the whole thing about the medical data is just, it's a little too much. You can go to the CDC website. It's a little iffy to handle it, but I actually have a screenshot here. I'm just going to go through one row of this. As of today, August the 19th, in all of the United States, this is the 33rd week of this pandemic. You can sort on sex. I sorted on male. In the age group of 15 to 24 years old, males, the total deaths of all people in that age group from all causes is 90. The COVID-19 deaths are 0. Nobody in the age of 15 to 24, according to the CDC, has died from COVID-19.
Yeah.
I mean,
you didn't see that in the Big Ten release, did we?
No, you certainly didn't. And now you got to factor out of that these are athletes that are really in great shape. It's just a little mind-boggling. You can go through this and you can see curves, and when you see the curves in that age group, it's flat. It's right on 0. And then this was last week, and then I got to wondering, I wonder if I can actually find out by people, the actual count, how many have passed from COVID-19 in that age group, and I found it. It's actually 0.
Very good. Joe, appreciate it. Thank you very much. And you're not alone. A lot of people that they've looked at that, and we've learned a lot about the virus in 5 months. It's certainly a real thing. I know there's some people believe that it's a hoax. It's not a hoax. It's real. But it also, I think we've learned that it attacks the elderly population much more than the young folks, and that's one of the reasons people have the argument that you can go ahead and do sports this time of year. Something else that popped in today, Ben, is that there was a committee that met about eligibility issues, and the Division I Council is recommending to the NCAA Board of Directors that all fall sport athletes keep their year of eligibility no matter if they play in the fall or spring or how many games. The board will need to vote on that on Friday. Now, for athletes in the Big Ten, I'm all for that. That's great. But if the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC play, let's say they play 6-8 games, but if you read that but to the letter of the law they're going to get another year of eligibility. That doesn't seem to make sense to me. Why would they get an extra year?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're just trying to throw a blanket over the whole situation. But to me, I mean, I think you got to put some type of percentage on it. I really do. I think you got to say, and even if you want to just go with, the typical 12-game schedule. If you don't want to take the 2 games off or the 3 games off, whatever, but at some point there's got to be a percentage where that should count. That ought to count.
Right.
And playing less games should help you. It should definitely help those percentages be lower. I don't know what that threshold is. Is it 50%? It's probably more than that 4 game. I'm fine with giving them more leeway than just that 4 games that you normally have. If you want to boost it to 6 or 50%, that's fine. But yeah, I'm with you. If you're able to get 7, 8, 9, 10 games in, it doesn't seem right that they're allowed another year. I don't know.
I totally agree. I hope that there's some more discussion on this. And again, it's not the board has to approve it later on, so there's one more step for this to go. But a lot of people have been waiting for this ruling, and we talked about it last night with Sam McEwen of the Omaha World Herald. Makes perfect sense for Big Ten athletes. Absolutely. Your season has been taken away from you, and according to the commissioner, it will not be revisited. So even if you get to play 6 or 7 games in the spring, you're not really playing for bowl games and those type of things that come at the end of the rainbow for college football. But to just blanketly throw that out there and teams that are going to maybe compete here in the coming months to get their year back, that doesn't – I don't know. I hope that there's some more thought put into that as we move along. 531-500-4686. That's the number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question. We're back with more of Sports Nightly next. Ben McLaughlin with you on a Wednesday night, 531-500-4686, the number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question. Back to our text line. I have a question. With no Big Ten TV contract, how does Nebraska receive all of the $50 million plus Big Ten money? They don't. They won't. That's a huge part of this, is that there's not games on TV. The TV networks are not going to write that check. So it's pretty easy to answer that one. Let's get to the phones. Omaha and Dave, you're up next. Welcome to Sports Nightly.
Hi, Greg. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, I just want to comment about Ronnie Green's live comments on KLIN. That was podcast. But
sure.
I heard that whole thing. And you know what? You know what I got to say about Ronnie Green? He should be the commissioner of the Big Ten. He laid everything out so eloquently, and he went step by step. I just love who we have in control here at Nebraska, from Scott Frost to Bill Moose to Ronnie Green, all the way up.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. Yeah, I would echo that completely. I think we're very lucky to have the people that we have here in Lincoln. I think everybody's on the same page, which is fantastic, and it's amazing what transparency, honesty, and openness can do with public perception, Greg.
Absolutely. I think everybody has felt the same way, from Ted Carter to Ronnie Green to Bill Moose to Scott Frost. Nebraska's had everybody pulling the right same direction, in the right direction in our eyes. So good to have him. Dave, appreciate the call. Let's come back to Lincoln next. And Don, good evening. Don, welcome to Sports Nightly.
Okay, Mr. Craig.
Yeah.
I want to make a comment. I think this playing the 3 Pro Domes is a blessing, because if we were willing to go play during the football season, either in Penn State or Rutgers or Maryland, that's further away and open stadiums during the wintertime. And if these stadiums are indoors and probably bigger, we can have more fans going up to the stadiums and play and support their team.
No, that's a great point. I mean, if they do that, they're probably not going to let anybody into the game, so the fans of these teams aren't going to be a part of this thing. There's just a lot of this that I don't like at all. And Don, appreciate the call. It doesn't seem to make sense in a lot of ways what they're trying to put out there. I'm trying to find a tweet that Barrett Sally from ESPN put out where he just kind of said, let me get this straight. You want to play inside where the virus is more of a threat. You want to play in the winter when we think it's going to be worse. And he had like 4 straight things. You're like, yeah, that's exactly right. Don, appreciate it. Let's go to West Point next. And Pete, good evening, Pete.
Good evening. How you guys doing?
Good, Pete. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Enjoy your show.
Appreciate
I got a
it.
question. I didn't hear anything addressed about practicing the 20 hours a week. Are they still going to get the 20 hours a week?
No, it's been dropped to 12, Pete. They've been cut back to 12 hours.
So can they do like a scrimmage then and televise that over Nebraska Educational or something?
Can't wear pads.
Can't wear pads.
Right.
Well, I think it's a little bit asinine to say, well, we're not going to play football because of the spread of COVID, but yet you're going to turn them out to the general population. I would think if I was a football player, I'd say that's a higher risk. I'd rather be in a confined space or a controlled environment, and maybe litigation will come back. Maybe they'll get sued because they did turn them loose into a more dangerous zone.
Pete, there are a lot of people out there a lot of athletes out there that echo that point. And Justin Fields, who seems to be one of the ringleaders on this, Ohio State quarterback, was on, I think it was the Today Show or Good Morning America or something this morning, and he said the exact same thing, why he felt safer playing football than not. And that was a great platform for him to go out and speak to millions of people who maybe aren't even sports fans, that think it's ridiculous that college football players are even talking about playing. That's a perspective they're probably not used to hearing.
Pete, appreciate the phone call. Let's get another caller in before we run out of time this hour. Let's go out to Scotts Bluff and Dale. Good evening, Dale. Welcome to Sports Nightly.
Hey, guys. Hey, I just want to comment on playing football in January, and that I think that's ridiculous. I don't think that's even really being considered. Because anybody believes that, I got some oceanfront property out here to sell them in western Nebraska because that's just, I think it's just to try to put smoke and mirrors, whatever you want to call it. But, and I just think, what he said today about some of the schools not having the proper testing. Well, I don't believe the Big Ten ever came out and said exactly what testing they should have. And I think if a school like Nebraska or Ohio State or any of them feel comfortable playing, you should still allow them to play if they want to. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, Dale, appreciate it. I do think there are a lot of schools out there that feel that way. That and that's the other thing too, Greg, that I appreciate about most national media. That seems to be the growing theme, right? Mike Greenberg came out and said that. There's a lot of national media that are coming out and vocalizing that and fair or not, a lot of this conversation didn't start until Ohio State stepped up and used their big boy voice to the conference. But I do think there are a lot of people that feel that way, and Dale's point of if they feel safe, why not let them? And I think Mike Greenberg used great logic. If it was the other way around, and the Big Ten allowed schools to play, so let's say 14 schools are allowed to play, and 2 of them don't want to play. Okay, fine, you let them opt out. What's the difference if 2 want to play as opposed to 12? Is it just because it's the idea is the same? It's just the numbers that are different.
It's a great point. It is absolutely a great point. I'm glad Dale brought up the winter session. We're going to talk more about that next hour. James Franklin, Penn State head coach, did have a press conference today. He addressed it. He pushed this narrative forward. Ryan Day of Ohio State was the first that brought this up last week, and it appears to have support in Madison, Wisconsin. And Ronnie Green, on his interview on our Lincoln affiliate KLIN an hour ago, said the same thing, that it seems to have a lot of support among the presidents. We'll hear what James Franklin had to say next hour, along with our Husker Huddle with Jeremiah Searles talking to Nick Gates. Our Sports Nightly Hotline brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. What an hour here on Sports Nightly, huh?
Good evening, I'm Tim Curran. Leading off with some Big Ten news, Conference Commissioner Kevin Warren stated in an open letter today that the vote held by the league's presidents was, quote, overwhelmingly in favor of suspending fall sports and will not be revisited. Moving on to Major League Baseball, plenty of games in progress right now. Cubs and Cardinals are all tied up at 2 in the top of the 7th. That's the second game of their doubleheader. The Cards took game 1. Also in the top of the 4th, it's the Rays who lead the Yankees 2-1. The Indians and the Pirates, no score between them in the top of the 4th. And in the bottom of the 3rd, it's the Mets with a 1-run lead over the Marlins, 1-zip the score. And that one, and no score between the Reds and the Royals in the top of the 1st. Moving on to the NBA playoffs, one game in progress is the Celtics who lead the 76ers 67-57 with just under 11 minutes to go there in the third quarter. Boston leads that series 1-0. A couple finals from earlier today was the Raptors taking down the Nets 104-99 and the Jazz taking down the Nuggets 124-105. Moving on to the NHL playoffs, a few finals to bring you from earlier today. It was the Lightning advancing past the Blue Jackets 5-4 as they took the series 4-1. The Bruins also won their series 4-1 as they took down the Hurricanes 2-1. And the Avalanche demolished the Coyotes 7-1 just a few moments ago as Colorado wins the series 4-1 as well. Live inside the Huskers Sports Network studios, Adam Curran.
Your state, your team, your show. This is Sports Nightly.
Adrian gets the snap, puts it in the belly of Wandale around the left side. He's got a first down, 35-30. Wandale 25-20, 15, 10, 5. He is in. Touchdown, Nebraska.
Now, let's check the pulse of Husker Nation with your hosts, Greg Sharp and Ben McLaughlin.
I've gone an entire hour. I haven't congratulated Ben on his Tampa Bay Lightning moving on in the NHL playoffs.
Yeah, they avenged their first-round loss from the Blue Jackets last year. So that felt great.
Is that right? That was a rematch, huh, from a year ago?
They got swept right out of the playoffs last year.
Wow.
First round.
Well, that was a nice overtime win today. I think there's already four teams are through to the next round. They'll be down to 8 teams in a hurry in the NHL playoffs. We continue to monitor that. The NBA, Tim gave you the scores for today. The news yesterday, Ben, was the number one seeds both getting beat. The Bucks get beat by Orlando, and then the Portland Trail Blazers trip up the Lakers. Man, Lillard just is on fire, isn't he?
Yeah, that was something else. That was really quite the effort yesterday by the 8 seeds. Yeah, Orlando taking down Milwaukee, which not a lot of people saw happening. And, of course, there was a lot of anticipation for that first game with the Los Angeles Lakers. And, yeah, Damian Lillard's hot right now. There's no doubt. He's getting some help. There's other players playing well for Portland. But, man, the Lakers were up 6 late in that game. I think it was 87-81 with a few minutes left and end up losing. That's going to be sour.
Portland might get another one in that series. I do think the Bucks rally and get going, and they're just clearly better than Orlando, but they weren't yesterday, so NBA playoffs underway as well. All right, coming up this hour, we're going to hear some clips here in a minute from James Franklin, Penn State head football coach. He had a press conference today, talked about a couple of different topics that we'll get into. Then we'll have our Husker Huddle for the week. Jeremiah Searles will sit down with Nick Gates, who's currently in an NFL camp, and we'll also have Lane Grindle, our Major League Baseball insider, who will be along to give us his latest takes on Major League Baseball. But James Franklin did meet with the media today in State College. He talked about all the issues and why he thought the vote went for no fall football in the Big Ten.
I don't necessarily have a issue with the decision, but I have an issue with the process, and I got an issue with the timing. It was challenging to keep getting up in front of my team and getting up in front of my parents and not having answers to their questions. So to me, if we were going to make the decision to delay the season, that we at least took the time to work with the NCAA and the Big Ten to have all the answers for what that's going to mean when it comes to eligibility, when it comes to scholarships, when it comes to, the next opportunity to play, when that is it the spring? Is it the winter? Is it going to not be to next season? What does that mean with roster management? What does that mean with incoming recruits? I've met almost weekly with our players, their parents, and also recruits, and it's difficult to continue getting up in front of those people as the leader of my organization and not only deliver bad news, but not be able to deliver the answers to their questions. I think that's the job of the leader is to set the vision, set the plan, and then drive everybody towards that vision and that plan.
There's a lot that makes a lot of sense there. And look, I'm not in charge of 100-plus players and answering to parents, but I can imagine how frustrating that must be, when those parents are looking to you for the health and well-being of their kid, and to just not be able to provide them with the answers that any parent would want to have. I completely see and understand his frustration. There's no question about that.
Yeah, he brings up a lot of good points. If you're going to do that, at least give us some ammunition to come back to calm our players and our parents down. And we may be getting some on the eligibility question by the end of the week. We talked about that at the end of hour one. That at least one hurdle has already been cleared. It has to go to a full vote of the governors to restore eligibility for all these student athletes, which I do think will calm some people down. He then went on he was asked about the challenges within a league like the Big Ten that spans from Nebraska to the East Coast and Rutgers, different regions of the country where the virus has certainly had differing effects. Here's James Franklin.
I had mentioned some programs and people got upset with the programs I was mentioning, and I wasn't, mentioning any specific programs for a reason. I was just saying, Nebraska's challenges may be different than Penn State's challenges compared to Rutgers' challenges, compared to Wisconsin's challenges, just based on, the demographics. But specifically to your question, I have not heard anything about that within the Big Ten. I have not heard anything about that in reference to Penn State. I haven't heard anything about that, but I just, I thought I would also add that point and clarify, what I was talking about earlier.
And he was also relating to some of the talk that there was several schools, Nebraska, Penn State, Ohio State, that were trying to cobble. Maybe if you got 6 teams together, you could play each other round robin and get some games in. That was kind of what he referenced there toward the end. But I think that's kind of been Nebraska's point. It's much different for us and how we've dealt with it here than it is other places. So if they're a no-go, can we then do something on our own? I think that kind of fits into it. And I don't know that a lot of people in the Big Ten would have had a problem if Nebraska went out and put a couple of games together for the fall.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, especially when they have the backing of some of these other schools. Those are things that we'll never know, but yeah, I mean, James Franklin came across today pretty strong. I appreciated that. It's still amazing to me how, it's heroic and courageous when Penn State and Ohio State do it, but Nebraska gets threatened to get kicked out of the league. I mean, that for some reason that just still sticks with me. But yeah, I mean, I give James Franklin a lot of credit for the way that he handled himself today.
Yeah, more clip from him, and this goes into what we were talking about in hour one about a winter season, not necessarily a spring season. James Franklin added fuel to that fire. Listen to this comment.
Yeah, I think it needs to be more of a winter season than a spring season. I think the later you go into the year, again, that's going to start to impact, the following season. It's gonna have an impact on that in terms of too many games in too short period of time, in terms of injury, enough time for guys to get healthy, for injury prevention, for the right amount of training that we have to do beforehand to be ready to compete. All those things. How are you going to handle incoming recruits? How are you going to handle rosters? How many guys are going to end up playing, how many guys aren't going to end up playing, and based on opting out. Is the NFL going to move back the combine and the draft, which they have the ability to do based on the collective bargaining agreement? They have the ability to move the combine and the draft back, so those conversations are happening as well. All these things have got to be tied together to make it work effectively and efficiently for as many as possible.
So there's James Franklin, Penn State, adding fuel to the fire of having a winter season starting the 1st of January, playing games in dome stadiums in Minneapolis, Detroit, and Indianapolis, doubleheaders. The league schools all fly to those locales and play. An 8-game schedule, and then have a conference championship so that you can determine a conference winner, be done by mid to late March, giving guys another month to get recovered and ready for next fall. Ryan Day was the first to kind of push this, the head coach at Ohio State. Apparently, out of reports out of Madison, Wisconsin today, that their parents of their football players have been briefed about this plan. Part of me wonders, Ben, is this just pushing it up? And he laid out some of the reasons, but pushing it up, does that also keep the current guys engaged longer? You go, okay, we're going to play in January. So you're talking about just, you're not going to do anything in September and October and November, but we're back practicing in December, and here we go in January. It's not that far away, where if you're thinking March, that seems so much farther away to keep guys engaged, even though you and I are both highly skeptical that it can happen. But maybe that's part of the ploy, is to try to dangle a carrot right out there in front of the guys to keep them hungry.
Yeah, do I think a January season happens? No. Do I think a spring season happens? No. If you're asking me which season makes more sense if you're going to do it realistically, it's the winter season. I mean, to me, for all the reasons that James Franklin laid out, if I had to pick one, just in terms of logistics, and and everything involved with all of those questions that he asked. If you take the health part out of it, which I know you can't do, but just the football logistics of it, the spring season makes a lot less sense than the January season. But the big curveball here, and we're talking a big 12-6 Bronson Arroyo curveball, is how the health kind of throws a wrench into this plan. Because, again, on paper, when you're putting this together and you're to say, okay, option A, option B, option A looks pretty great compared to option B. But I think the health issue maintains its weight, the amount of heaviness into this plan that I don't know that we can account for just yet.
It's just, again, I think everybody, they're all trying. All these coaches are now trying to get involved a little bit and try to offer up some solutions. I mean, you had the Jeff Brom plan. Remember that last week? Everybody's forgotten about that one, Ben, already. Nobody's even talking about the Purdue coach's plan where he had, I think it was an 8-game spring schedule starting, I think, in early March, getting done in May, and then not coming back next year until October. To me, a lot of it still, it's still we got to sit back and see what happens with the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12. If they pull this off, I just don't know that the Big 10 can get off kilter that much from what those three conferences are going to be able to do next season. If they do theirs and get it done here, then you don't want to get off a month off of their calendar for next year. I just don't think you want to do that.
And that's an impossible question that you'll never know the answer to, because you're obviously going to pick one road or the other. But which one hinders you less? Which path allows you to get back to the path of normalcy the fastest? Is playing a fall winter season or a spring season, does that set you back further? Is it worth the short-term gain of playing games if it means long-term, more catching up to do to the other conferences? If the answer is no, then I don't know that you go forth. If you think that you can catch up to those other three schools and withstand the recruiting bashing that you're going to take for a year, if it means you're back to a level playing field within a year or even 2 years, I think that's something you got to talk about.
Let me ask you this. What amount of games do you think you could do in the spring, sometime, whether it's January, February, March, April, whatever? How many do you think these guys could play and still be able to come back and get on schedule next year? Is it 6? Is 6 the max? Is it 4?
I would say the most that I would feel comfortable with is your division. I think that's the most and that's the most that I would feel comfortable with. So
I'm with you.
I wouldn't want to go any more than 6 if I'm trying to catch up and play again in September. But who knows?
I'm with you. I think 6 would be doable if you did that, and you could go full bore next fall and get your 12 games in with your bye weeks and all those things that you have there. Anything more than 6, I think, is ludicrous. So if you could sprinkle 6 over a 2 or 3 months period of time, I think you could still then ask the athletes to come back and be ready to go next September or October for Nebraska, in their case, if they're going to play Illinois in Dublin, if that game is still go. I think 6 to me is the high water mark. 4 might be the better thing, but me personally, if we do the 6, I want them on college campuses, and I want the communities to be able to at least have the games here, at least 3 home games here, which I think would be a big benefit to that. Also, Josh just sent us a tweet from Nicole Auerbach, who also a big college football writer. She said she asked Kevin Warren if his son Powers was practicing and preparing to play at Mississippi State, despite Kevin Warren's input in the Big Ten's decision to not play. Powers is playing. Quote, as a family, we've had many difficult discussions regarding this issue.
So again, obviously a roundabout way to answer it. Like, she asked you a yes or no question. Is he playing or is he not playing? Like, I don't know.
Crazy. All right, need to take a break. When we come back, this week's edition of the Husker Huddle, Jeremiah Searles will be along to chat with Nick Gates. That's coming up next.
Welcome back to another edition of Husker Huddle here. I'm your host, Jeremiah Searles, here on the Husker Sports Network. Tonight, we are really excited to have our guest, Nick Gates, newest extension for the New York Giants, former Nebraska Cornhusker offensive lineman. Nick, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Hey, man, well, we appreciate you getting on here. First of all, let me be the one to say congratulations on your extension. That's the ultimate goal for anyone, to continue their NFL career, continue living that dream. So I know everyone back here in Husker Land was excited for you. Talk to us a little bit about what that was like for you going through that extension process.
It was awesome. I mean, I get the chills right now just thinking back to it. But it was a good feeling just to, get that and, have my agent, tell me. I thought he was lying at first. I still had 2 more years on my deal, so I was kind of a little surprised they gave me it. But I can't be more happy to be in New York and be, with the Giants. And, this community is awesome. They're a bunch of, blue-collar workers, so that's what kind of football team we're trying to be.
That's awesome, Nick. I know we flash back a couple years here. You leave Nebraska as an early leave. You go undrafted to the Giants. Probably not exactly how you thought your NFL career was going to start, but how did that kind of maybe motivate you, or how did that help you get to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely not how I wanted to start, but it's not how you start, it's how you finish, and it definitely helped me and motivate me, and get me going and make me work a little harder. Definitely as an undrafted guy, we gotta make the best opportunities of when we get a shot and things like that. And it's a little harder for us, but you just got to get in there every time when you can and just get the job done.
So you've played in almost 20 games here in the NFL. You've started over 3 or 5, I think is what the number that I saw. What position have you been working at, and where do you really feel comfortable along that offensive line now?
To be honest with you, they throw me in anywhere. I'm comfortable, anywhere. I was getting down those snaps at center was probably the most difficult thing, but I worked my butt off this offseason to get that done. And, but yeah, I'm good for anywhere. Wherever they need me to go for the day, I go there and, get the job done.
That's awesome. You got a young stud quarterback up there in Daniel Jones, who saw a lot of promising things out of him last year. What's it like working with a guy like that, and what can some of people that are watching the NFL this year expect out of a guy like that?
Oh yeah, no, he's gonna, he's a good guy. He hopefully makes a, few good steps the next year as most rookies do from their first season to their second season, especially at quarterback. But he's a good guy, team player. I'd love to go to war or go to battle with him any day of the week.
That's awesome, Nick. We talked a little bit off air about this off season being just so different for everyone. I mean, everyone's had to find a way to manage their way through the off season, trying to train, trying to get the best that they can to really go put a good product on the field this year. I know you moving around on the offensive line, having no OTAs, a shortened training camp. It's going to be tough. I mean, how have you been able to handle that, and kind of how did you handle this off season with the COVID-19?
So I got lucky this off season. My gym stayed open that I was working out at, and open for all professionals. So we had about 12 to 15 guys in there on a daily basis that were working out and doing all that. So I got lucky on that aspect. And other than that, OTAs on the Zoom calls were a little difficult to get used to at first. But once you get in a routine of getting on there for an hour or two, and it gets kind of easy. And once you kind of figure everybody's out and figure everybody who they are, it gets a little easier. But it's definitely a lot better in person.
Oh, for sure. I mean, how would you imagine if this was your rookie year? I mean, I can think back to my rookie year being an undrafted free agent. You needed every rep, every board meeting, every chair drill, every type of drill you could do. And to come into camp, how have you seen some of these rookies handle this training camp now that you're out on the field with no OTAs? Do they seem a little lost, or how are they handling it?
No, definitely coming in as a rookie then this year would be tough, especially as an undrafted guy, because you didn't get all those opportunities in OTA. But our rookies are taking it, with stride and, doing a pretty good job. We got a really good offensive line coach that, has worked his butt off with all of us, and, he's got us in the right direction.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little Husker football here. The news came out this year, or this week actually, no Big Ten football. And I know I've gone through the stages of grief of I've ate my feelings on a Wednesday, and then I've gotten angry the last few days. But how have you taken that news? I know you're deep in it in training camp right now, but how weird is it going to be not seeing the Huskers on Saturday in the fall?
I don't know, it's definitely going to be weird. I always tried to, catch their game as much as possible every Saturday night, and try to talk a little crap with everybody in the the dining hall before the games on Sunday. but it'll definitely be different. It's a weird thing going on with everything right now, and we'll just take it with every stride.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that this offensive line, Nick, you still know quite a few guys that are on this line, only being about 3 years removed now. You got to see these guys when they were young pups, and now you got guys like Matt Farniak, Brandon Hymas, and I mean, you got a young guy in Cameron Jurgens, Bo Wilson out there that are really going to hopefully make a splash this year and eventually end up where you are in the NFL and where I was lucky enough to go. Talk to us a little bit about what these guys were like when they were younger, and you were the older guy and you were the senior. What did you see in some of these guys?
One guy that stood out to me his true freshman year is Brandon Hymas, and he came out and he played really well when he had to go in there, and I think he started the last 5 games of his freshman, something like that, and I thought he did really well. And we played some tough teams. I think it was Ohio State, like Wisconsin, and he held his own as a 18-year-old kid. Just came to college, but I think he'll definitely make a shot at the pros. I could see him getting drafted. I didn't really get to watch him too much last year, but I think he has a shot, definitely. And then Matt Farniak, he's a good kid too. He real tough, blue collar kid that comes to work every day. And they were definitely a little quiet when they first got there, but now that they go back, they're always good to talk about and talk with and everything like that.
And that's the way it's supposed to be. When you're a young guy, and I'm sure you experience this in the NFL too, is when you come in, it's fly under the radar, do your job, don't ruffle any feathers, and that's the same way in college too. So that's good to hear that those two guys did that. Little bit about this season as far as the NFL is scheduled to go as normal, but how has it been having, I don't want to call it a distraction, but almost as much as how's it been with the COVID-19 testing and all the hoopla around it? Have you guys as players really affected you much, or has it been pretty easy just to kind of do it and then just really focus on ball?
Our staff has really made it easy for us. Our training staff, they did a really good job. They moved us from our practice facility into the stadium, which is only about 200 yards away. And we're all literally, there's nothing's different. We just get tested every day, every morning. You just got to wake up a little bit earlier for that. But other than that, it's, they've done a really good job with us, and, making us feel like normal and getting us all, around each other and, following the protocols and everything. But they did a really good job.
Yeah, man, you should be I think that we should be playing preseason games this week, but no preseason this year. So, the first live action, first live bullets are going to be, for all the chips, all the table, man. How is that going to be different this year? I know you've experienced some preseason games before, and there's play a couple series, get out, much more of a tune-up. But, the first time you take that field this time, it's going to be for all the marbles. How mentally have you started preparing for that?
To be honest, I really haven't thought too much. I just kind of take it day by day and, still trying to get in the playbook and trying to master that. And, we put the pads on Monday. So, just taking one step at a time and, we'll see. It's definitely a bummer with no preseason games. And, it's definitely tough for those rookies. Their first live bullets will definitely be a legit, Monday Night Football game that we play against the Steelers. So a couple of them, get a wake-up call when they, got Cameron Hayward lining up across you, TJ Watt, all those guys. So it'll be a little different for them. But I think they'll be good. I think not enough people are talking about it, Nick, is the lack of opportunities for guys like you and myself that were undrafted free agents not having a preseason this year. If you look across the board, without a preseason, probably my first 2 years in the league, I don't know if I still have a job, or I don't know if I have the 6-year career NFL that I did have. I think that with no preseason, you're going to see an abnormal amount of undrafted free agent rookies get cut at the end of this year. And I think you're going to see an abnormal amount of rookies that are not going to play very much this year because you just can't trust them. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I think I mean that along the lines of you just can't really trust a rookie to go out there and, like you said, against TJ Watt or Cameron Hayward, when you have a really big investment behind you as an offensive lineman in Daniel Jones, a first-round pick. But I think that the rookies are really going to struggle this year with no preseason. What do you think? Yeah, no, that's definitely a couple of my buddies that are undrafted. We've talked about it. Like, these guys aren't going to be able to get film out. It's not just making your team. It's you have 32 or 31 other opportunities to make somebody else's team during the preseason with all the film. So it'll be tough. It'll be tough for those guys this year. But I think they'll just try to figure it out and chug along with what's going on. So.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, we really appreciate you taking your time out of camp here. We know you're really busy. We're excited for you this season. Again, congratulations on the extension. I'm sure we'll be seeing out there starting for the Giants, man. You got a big year this year coming up. Tough division in there with the Cowboys, the Eagles, and the Washington football team. But it should be a good time. Husker Nation's pulling for you as always. And next time you're in town, hit me up. We'll go out and we'll grab a drink.
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. This was awesome. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely, Nick. Thank you so much. Thank you again for joining on this week's edition of Husker Huddle.
Well, for the second straight week, you've almost seen a no-hitter, unfortunately, against the Brewers, but at least last night you got rid of that and put that game in extra innings.
It was a great game. I mean, really, last night's game had a little bit of everything in it. Kenta Maeda was really special. The changeup just got better and better as the game went along, and at one point, he had struck out 8 straight Brewers, which was a Twins organization record. And I think he sat down 22 straight at one point in the game as well. I mean, he was just really special. He got the chance to go back out there in the 9th. His pitch count was getting pretty high. But then Eric Sogard broke it up, and then the Brewers rallied against Taylor Rogers and ended up tying the game, sitting into extras. And there was some really good defensive work in extra innings, but Brewers couldn't get anything across. And finally, the speed of Byron Buxton, which is, not anything that should shock anybody. That guy can really fly. And that ended up being the difference in the end, and the Twins walked off in 12.
Lane, I want your thoughts about Maeda and the addition of him to the Twins. He had a nice career going with the Dodgers. What about that pickup for the Twins, and how much does that bolster maybe their postseason chances even?
Well, it gives them another solid starter. Rich Hill's going to go for them tonight. That's another veteran, another former Dodger, in fact. That has been around. He's pitched in postseason games. And so, they've put together a rotation that has some good pieces. At some point when they get Jake Odorizzi going, obviously he had a really nice year for them last year as well on the mound. And then they got the youngster and Jose Barrios, and then Randy Dobnak, who's pitching so well for them right now. He's kind of been one of the surprises in Major League Baseball. So it's a good rotation. And, Maeda, to go back to your question, I think is benefiting from being in a role and not being moved out of it. I mean, when he was with the Dodgers, he started one year, then the next year he's in the bullpen, and then he's a setup man another year, then he's back to starting. And then I just think he really didn't have a certain role he could count on with the Dodgers because he kind of moved in and out of that rotation over the course of his career there. He was a good pitcher for them, but he seems to have gone to another level. And I think he's been able to just settle in, know that he's going to get the ball every 5 days, and he's got that changeup working really well. And his slider was good last night, too. He didn't even throw that many fastballs. I mean, it was a lot of changeup and slider, and boy, were they good.
Okay, let's get to the story of the week, and that was Fernando Tatis swinging away 3-0 with his team up and belting one out of the ballpark. It seemed like everyone I've heard is okay with it except the Rangers. What's the opinion of people you've talked to?
I think if Jace Tingler doesn't apologize and Fernando Tatis doesn't apologize, this is a totally different story, and it might be a non-story. It might just be Chris Woodward getting upset and everybody moved on, because I don't think anybody else thinks this is that big of a deal. I certainly didn't know about this unwritten rule. I didn't know it was a thing. I mean, I think the other thing you have to understand is this is a different season, and every single game counts for 2.7. And when you're squeezing this many games into a short window and you don't know, I mean, you might have to play a bunch of double headers later in the year. You're just not sure exactly how the schedule is going to work out. So you don't want to be up, 7-0, 8-0, and take your foot off the pedal. I don't think that's something you want to do this year. I mean, I'm not saying you start running on the base paths and everything, but at the same time, you don't want to have to use your setup man because somebody gives it up in the 8th inning, and now all of a sudden you got to put your A bullpen out there to salvage a win and to hold on to a win in a game that you could have run away with and not had to use those guys. And now maybe they're not available the next day. So, I mean, I think the strategy of baseball is a little bit different this year anyway. So if you can hit a grand slam, hit a grand slam. It's a good thing to do. It's an entertaining thing to do. It's good for the game. He is a really special player. I think if he doesn't apologize, it's not that big a deal. But I think Jace Tingler, who's a new manager himself, clearly felt like maybe it was something they needed to do to err on that side of it. But I think most people have rallied to Fernando Tatis's defense on this one.
Yeah, I think you're right. Lane Grindle's with us, our Major League Baseball insider here on Sports Nightly on the Husker Sports Network. Last week I asked you about a couple of teams that maybe have gotten off to surprisingly good starts. Let me ask you about a couple of teams that haven't. The Boston Red Sox in the American League and the Giants in the National League. Are you surprised with either or both that they're really struggling out of the gate?
No, I'm not surprised at all. The Red Sox, I think we're anticipating this. This is why they moved Mookie Betts. They're trying to get their payroll back under control, and they still have some really good pieces. I mean, Xander Bogaerts is still a really good player. JD Martinez is still a really good player. Andrew Benintendi is still a really good player. Alex Verdugo, I think, is going to be a really good player. That was a good piece they got back in that deal for Mookie Betts. But overall, their pitching's not there. I just don't think that the Red Sox anticipated they were going to be big-time contenders in just a monster of an AL East. I mean, the Rays are really good. Obviously, we know the Yankees are really special this year. And the Orioles have kind of surprised people. Nobody anticipated that was the case, obviously, this year with Baltimore. But not totally surprised by that. And I'm not shocked at all that the Giants are off to a tough start. New era, no more Bruce Bochy. Gabe Kapler's there now. They have, some interesting pieces at the trade deadline, and I think that's probably going to be about it for them this year. See who they move here in the next week or two or in the next couple of weeks and see what kind of pieces they can get back. Now, I think they're well on their way to rebuilding the organization. I think they have some good pieces. Remember, Buster Posey opted out before the season began, too. That's the franchise, essentially. So I'm not surprised that they are where they are. It's going to take them a couple of years, but I think they've got a pretty good and talented front office. And so I think they will be back here in the coming years. It's just not going to be this year.
Lane, I think this is the first day, I may have this not quite right, this is the first day this month that everybody in baseball is playing. Teams aren't missing games because of COVID. How do you feel like the league has handled themselves through this first several weeks of the year?
I've been proud of the league and how they've handled this. It would have been very easy to let the court of public opinion shut down this season early on. But baseball made a commitment to finding a way to play, and they've been flexible, and they've changed protocols. They've gotten stricter with a lot of the protocols to make sure that this can work, and I think it's working. I think when guys are adhering to the protocols, for the most part, this has been working. We've had the incidents with the Marlins and the Cardinals, clearly. The Reds look like they averted disaster with their case over the weekend. That's a very good sign. I think we're all going to have to be flexible and open-minded and learn as we go. But the one thing we can't be open-minded about is that we have to be committed to getting this season in. And, as long as we feel like we can do that in a responsible way and mitigate any kind of outbreaks that are going to happen, everybody knew there were going to be some positive tests. I mean, I don't think anybody thought that you were going to go through a season and not have some positive tests. That was going to be something that if we're going to do this, we're going to have to accept that to a degree. But you want to try to mitigate it and keep it as safe as possible at the same time. I think we've learned from the Marlins situation. I think there's things that they learned from the Cardinals situation. There's going to be probably some more positive tests before the season's all said and done. But I think the commitment to keep moving forward has been the thing that's kept baseball going. And I think they've learned from each of these situations. And each time it's happened, the result has been safer protocols on the back end.
Well, the Cardinals are back up and going. They're going to play a ton of baseball. I mean, they're going to really test their depth, I think, over the coming months. But they're back up. They've had, I think, today's their third doubleheader since coming back. Your franchise has, knock on wood, kind of been immune to a lot of this, haven't they?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, Greg. It's gone
Announcer
really well
jinx.
so far. Yeah, no, it's gone really well so far, and our guys are committed to it. We've always had a great clubhouse culture, and I do think that matters in these types of situations because when you respect your teammates and when you respect the guys in your clubhouse, you're going to do better for yourself and for them. And I think you realize that everybody's got to be in this together, and I think that we have that kind of a culture with our team. Doesn't mean that it's perfect. Doesn't mean something can't happen at some point. Nobody's immune to this thing. But I do think that we've had a lot of success early on, and a lot of it has to do with these guys being on the same page and knowing that they're accountable for each other as well as themselves.
That doesn't seem to be the case in Cleveland. With Clevenger and Plesac, they both went out on their own in Chicago. They've been sent home, and now it sounds like there's guys on that team that say, if they come back, I'm out. That seems like that organization's kind of having a little infighting.
Well, but I think that's probably what you need to have happen, to be honest with you, is some of the veteran guys saying, look, they're not coming back. It has to be a serious thing. People have to take it serious if they want to get the baseball played. And so you have to follow these protocols or you're going to ruin it for everybody else. And I think that's the message those veterans are making. And I think you're going to see, more of that probably moving forward if there's any other kinds of situations. But I do think some of these new protocols where guys they're being held accountable. If they leave the hotel, everybody's finding out about it. I think that is going to help and continue to help. I think it already has been helping.
All right, Twins tonight. What's ahead for the Crew?
Twins tonight, and then a series in Pittsburgh, and then back home for a long homestand for the Brewers. It's crazy. I mean, this season goes so fast. We were just at the 30% line 2 days ago, and by this time next week we'll be at the 50% line to the season pretty much. So it's going fast, but we've played a lot of really close games here recently, and I'll tell you, when you get into those nail-biting games, late-inning situations, it feels really good. It feels just like baseball any other time, and really enjoying it. And you're starting to feel a little bit of that sense of urgency as we're getting closer to September with playoff chases starting to heat up and stuff. I think that picture is going to clear up a little bit more over the next 2 weeks. And I think September is going to be a lot of fun, to be honest with you.
I'm loving it, enjoying every bit of it. Thank you, Lane. We appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the week. We'll talk next week.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
Sports Highlight rolling along here on a Wednesday night. 531-500-4686. The number if you want to be a part of the program. Ben rejoins me. Let's head down to Beatrice and John. Good evening, John. Welcome to Sports Highlight.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I was just wondering if there'd ever be a possibility of trying to have a split season. If we could get, say, like 6 games in, fairly early this fall, and then finish up with 4 games after the first of the year, kind of like they're pushing for now. And with the idea of trying to protect the fall season in 2021, I would think if we only had, say, like 4 games early winter, we could still come back next fall and start on time. Just a thought. I guess I haven't really heard anybody say anything about that. And, maybe talk to the SEC, throw them a bone, saying, hey, maybe you could have a backup plan if things get kind of hairy this fall and you aren't going to get your 10 games in. Be satisfied with 6 and then come back with 4 after the 1st of January. Just a thought.
Yeah, John, appreciate the call. That's something that we heard a few people kind of mention, way back before we heard an announcement, a suggestion, and at the time I thought it made some sense. I don't think it's conceivable now, John, to have kind of an organized split season. It seems further and further logical and real that any football in the fall for the Big Ten is going to happen at all, but let's just say hypothetically that there was. I don't know that it would be organized to a point to where you could play some in the fall, some in the winter or the spring. The Big Ten is just too split on that decision at this point to get everybody to agree to that and have any type of carryover in your season.
Yeah, you're right. We heard a little bit of talk about that from some people back in June, but I don't know that it ever really grabbed any traction. Looking at it, it would make some sense to try to do that if you're in hot areas where you just don't think you can get it done. But I'm just skeptical about this winter thing. I think I even had somebody shoot me an email in the last half hour and says, Greg, that's nothing more than a stall tactic. It's just trying to drag this thing out, try to give a carrot in front of your student athletes. If that's the motivation behind it being floated by people, shame on them for doing that and building up false hope again. I'd like to think that's not the case, but it might just well be. And in fact, we even had a caller early in the program from Scottsbluff who kind of said the same thing. But that's just that's a fallacy to be talking about that, and they may all be right. It's so frustrating. It is for everybody. I know the fans are frustrated. Obviously, our coaches are frustrated. Our players are extremely frustrated. The parents of the players are obviously pretty frustrated. The protest is apparently going to go on. Kevin Warren was asked about parents coming by the Big Ten offices to protest. He says, "Oh, have at it. We're all working remotely." We're all working remotely.
Have
So
fun,
go
dude.
ahead and stand out there. You do you, Kevin Warren. You do you.